Hello, my name is Nalani Brown, the philanthropy coordinator at Frank Toby Jones, reading chapter 11 of book the second, A Tale of Two Cities, at the Point Defiance Rest and Senior Center. Chapter 11, A Conversation of Friends. Sydney, Shriver said that very night, or rather early in the morning, to his jackal, make another punch. I have to tell you to go. Sydney had been working hard all night and before to clear Shriver's table before the holidays. Finally, all matters were settled and everything was ready until November arrived with its atmospheric fogs and its legal fogs and the opportunity to put the mill back into operation. Sydney had not shown signs of sobriety during those nights, and in the one in question, he had to use a greater number of wet towels to continue working, because an extraordinary quantity of wine preceded them, and he was in a rather deplorable condition when he was permanently removed. He permanently removed his turban and threw it into the basin, where he moistened it from time to time during the last 6 hours. "Are you making the punch?" asked the majestic Shriver, with his hands resting on his waist and looking from the sofa where he was lying. "Yes." "Well, look, I'm going to tell you something that will surprise you and that may incline you to conceptualize me. I'm ready to see what I look like. I want to get married." "You?" "And the more great is that not for money. What do you say to me now?" "I don't feel like saying anything. Who is she?" "Guess it." "Do I know her?" "Guess." "I'm not in the mood to guess at 5 in the morning when my head looks like a pot of crickets. If you want me to do my best to guess, buy me dinner first." "Since you don't wait to strain, I'll tell you," Shriver said, settling in. "I have no hope that you will understand me, Sydney, and because you are an insensitive dog." "You, on the other hand," Sydney exclaimed, busy making the punch, "you're a sensitive and poetic spirit." "Men," Shriver exclaimed, laughing. "I don't pretend to be the essence of sensitivity, but I'm a lot more delicate than you." "Ah, you are only more fortunate." "It's not that, I mean, more, let's say gallant," Carton suggested. "Good, let's say that, gallant. What I mean is that I'm a man," Shriver said, swaggering as his friend made the punch, "who tries to be nice, who goes to some trouble to be nice, who knows how to be nicer than you in the company of women." "Follow," Carton told him. "Before I go on," Shriver said, "I have to tell you one more thing. You have been to Dr. Minette's house as many times as I have, or more perhaps, and I have always been ashamed of your rough character. Your manner has been that of a sullen, short-tempered dog, and frankly, I have been ashamed of you, Sydney." "Well, for a man like you, it must be highly beneficial to be ashamed from time to time, and therefore you should be grateful to me." "Don't take it as a joke," Shriver replied. "No, Sydney. It is my duty to tell you, and I tell you to your face for your sake, that you are a man who has no conditions to be in society. You're an unpleasant man." Sydney downed a glass of the punch he had just made and laughed. "Look at me," Shriver said, swaggering. "I have less need to make myself agreeable than you, as I am in a much more independent position. So why do I make myself nice?" "I've never seen you were," Sydney murmured. "I do it out of duty and because I'm sorry." "It would be better if you continued with your story about marriage. You already know that I am incorrigible." "You don't have enough business to be incorrigible," Shriver said. grumpily. "It is true. I have no business that I know of," Sydney replied. "And who is the lady?" "I don't want the mention of her name to displease you, Sydney," said Shriver, preparing himself with exaggerated cordiality to pronounce the lady's name. "Because I know you don't mean half of what you say, but if you felt it, everything would be the same because it doesn't matter. I make this slight exordium because you once spoke to me of this lady in rather light terms." "Me?" "Yes, and precisely in this room." Sidney Carton looked at the punch and his friend. Then he drank and looked at him again. "When you spoke of this lady, you said that she was a doll with golden hair. This young lady is Miss Minette. If you were a man endowed with some sensitivity and delicacy, I would certainly have been offended by the expression you used, but I know you lack all that. Therefore, it does not bother me, just as I would not be bothered by the opinion of a man who judged a painting of mine if he lacked artistic taste, or who censored a musical composition of mine if he had no ear." Sidney Carton was still drinking the punch in large quantities, but still staring at his friend. "Now you know everything, Sidney," Shriver said. "I don't care about money. She's a charming girl, and I've made it a point to give myself this satisfaction. I think I have enough money to give me pleasure. She will have me in a pleasant man who prospers quickly and a man of some distinction. I'm a good match for her, although she's worth a fortune. Are you amazed?" Carton, who was still drinking punch, replied, "Why?" "Do you approve of my idea?" "Why shouldn't I approve it?" "Perfectly," he said to his friend. "I see that you take the matter better than I imagined, and that with respect to me you are less mercenary than I thought. Although you already know, because you are, that your old partner is a man of great willpower. Yes, Sydney, I'm already tired of this life, and I think it must be nice for a man to have a home when he is inclined to own it. I am convinced that Miss Minette will gracefully occupy the position that I am going to offer her, and that she will always be a good company for me. So I am determined. And now, Sydney, my friend, I have to tell you something about your situation and your fortune. You are in a very bad way. You know that? You ignore the value of money, you lead an unpleasant life, and one day you're going to have a serious stumble and sink into illness and misery. I think you would do well to find yourself a nurse." The emphasis with which he had uttered those words made him sound double in stature and 4 times more offensive. "Now let me recommend you," Shriver continued. "Take a serious look at the matter. Get married. Find someone who can take care of you. You don't care if you don't like women, if you don't understand them, or don't have the tact in dealing with them. Find a respectable woman who owns some properties, something like a homeowner or guest house patron, and marry her to avoid future calamities. This is my advice. And now think about it, Sydney." "I'll think about that," Sydney said. Chapter 12. The Delicate Gentleman. Shriver, now determined to offer that fortune to the doctor's daughter, decided to make his happiness before leaving town to enjoy the holidays. After discussing the matter in his head, he concluded that it would be preferable to carry out the preliminaries as soon as possible, and that there would be more than enough time to arrange the wedding at Christmas. He had no doubt that he had won the lawsuit. It was a clear matter, without the slightest weakness. He presented it to the jury, and since the opposing party had nothing to allege, the jury did not even withdraw to deliberate, so a sentence was passed, all in accordance with the request of Mr. Shriver, C.J. Mr. Shriver opened his vacation by inviting Miss Minette to take him to Vauxhall Gardens. Having been refused the invitation, he offered to go to Ranelagh and since his proposal was not accepted either, he resolved to appear in Soho and there declare his noble aspirations. So he left the temple one day for Soho, buoyed by the childish joy of the holidays. Since on his way he found himself in front of the Tellson Bank, and remembering that Mr. Laurie was a close friend of the Minettes, he resolved to enter the bank and reveal to Mr. Laurie the happiness that was to descend on Soho. Opened, then the door of the establishment, descended the 2 steps. He walked past the 2 tellers, old, and went to the office of Mr. Laurie, sitting at a table laden with striped books, illuminated by light passing on the lattice window. "Hello," cried Mr. Shriver. "How are you?" One of Shriver's quirks was that he seemed too big everywhere, so the 2 old clerks eyed him jealously, while he was pushing through the walls. Mr. Laurie answered quietly and shook his head. "Can I help you?" he added in an official tone. "Oh, no thanks. My visit is purely private. I would like to speak to you on a personal matter." "Really?" exclaimed Mr. Laurie. "I am determined," said Mr. Shriver, resting his arms on the table. "I am determined to make a proposal of marriage to this lovely little friend, Miss Minette." "Caramba!" exclaimed Mr. Laurie, rubbing his chin at the same time and looking suspiciously at his interlocutor. "What do you mean by that?" Shriver explained. "What do I mean?" Mr. Laurie answered. "Nothing that has importance. My exclamation has been friendly and can mean whatever you want. But actually, you know, Mr. Shriver." He shook his head in a strange way, not daring to finish the sentence. "If I understand you, hang me," Shriver exclaimed, slapping his hand on the table. Mr. Laurie adjusted his wig tightly and amused himself by chewing on the end of a feather. "Do you think I'm not eligible?" Shriver asked, staring at him. "Oh yeah, I think so." "Am I not a good match?" "No doubt." "So what the hell are you saying?" "Well, Where were you going now?" asked Mr. Laurie. "Right there," Shriver said, punching the table. "If I were in your place, I wouldn't." "Why?" Shriver asked. "And I warn you, I'm going to corner you. You are a businessman, and such you are obliged not to speak lightly. Tell me then, what reason moves you to tell me that?" "Because I would not take such a step without knowing positively that I was going to achieve success." "What a reason!" exclaimed the lawyer, while Mr. Laurie looked at him carefully. "That a businessman like you, a man of age and experience who occupies a high position in a bank, dares to say that I have no chance of success, when he himself has recognized the existence of 3 reasons, each of which is enough to ensure it, and he is able to say it with his head on his shoulders." Shriver exclaimed as if it had been more natural for him to say it without his head. "When I talk about success, I was referring to what you can achieve with Miss Minette. And when I deal with the causes and reasons that make this success probable, I mean those that may influence Miss Minette. You may take into account the young lady. To the lady, first of all. By which you give me to understand that, in your opinion, the young lady is nothing more than a fool." "It is not like this. What I want to tell you," added the old man, blushing, "that I will not allow anyone to utter a disrespectful word against that young lady, and that if there were a man so rude, so ill-mannered, and so ill-tempered, that he could not contain himself and spoke with little respect of this young lady in my presence, not even Tellson would be able to prevent me from teaching him a lesson." The need to speak softly, despite his anger, had put Mr. Shriver's veins in a dangerous state, and it was no better than Mr. Laurie's veins when he spoke the last words. "This is what I must tell you, sir," cried Mr. Laurie, "and please bear it in mind." Shriver was sucking on the end of a ruler and then hitting his teeth with it. At last he broke the silence, saying, This is new to me, Mr. Laurie. You so deliberately advised me not to go to Soho and offer my hand in person? Are you asking my advice, Mr. Shriver? Yes, sir. Perfectly. Well, I have already given it to you, and you have just repeated it correctly. And I tell you, Shriver said with a laugh, that this is a ridiculous thing that surpasses any I've ever heard in my life. Now listen to me, added Mr. Laurie. As a businessman, I can say nothing about the matter, because in such character, I know nothing. But as an old friend who has carried Miss Minette in his arms, who enjoys her and her father's trust, and who has great affection for both, I can speak. Do you think I'm wrong? I don't know, Shriver replied. I suppose there was common sense in a certain house, but it seems they are a little nuts here. It could be, then, that you were right, although, to tell the truth, I did not suspect it. What I told you before is no more than my personal opinion, said Mr. Laurie, blushing again, but I will not allow anyone to utter offensive words to my friends, not even in these offices. Forgive me, Shriver said. Everything is forgiven. Thanks. I was going to tell you, Mr. Shriver, that it would be very unpleasant for you to see that you were wrong, and for the doctor himself, it would be painful to be forced to be explicit with you, not counting the unpleasant time you would give Miss Minette if he had not had to answer you negatively. You already know the terms in which I have the honor and happiness of being counted among friends of the family. If it pleases you, then, without the character of your representative and without mixing you up in anything, I can make some observations that confirm or rectify my judgment. If the result is not pleasant for you, you always have the option of judging for yourself. And if, on the contrary, my observations are in accordance with your wishes, we will have managed to avoid possible unpleasant situations for both parties. What do you think? How long will it take to find out? It is a matter of a few hours. Tonight I'll go to Soho, and then I'll pay you a visit at your house. Well, we agree, Shriver said. I'll wait until night. Mr. Shriver left the bank so fast that it created a draft that was difficult for the two weak employees to resist, even whom he had to pass. The lawyer was smart enough to realize that the banker would not have dared to express his adverse opinion to such an extent if he had only presumptions, and although he was ill-prepared to swallow that pill, he realized that he had no other choice. He had to resign himself, and he swallowed it, although determined to conduct the matter in such a way that ridicule would fall on the opposite party. Accordingly, when Mr. Laurie arrived home that night at 10 o'clock, he found the lawyer surrounded by papers and books, and apparently without almost remembering the matter that had brought him to his office in the morning. And he even went so far as to show surprise at seeing Mr. Laurie, as if his concerns had erased the matter from his mind. "Pooh is good," said the kind emissary after long efforts to bring Shriver to discuss the matter. "I've been to Soho." "In Soho?" the lawyer repeated coldly. "Do you want to believe that I no longer remembered that?" "And I have no doubt," added Mr. Laurie, "that I was right this morning to speak to you as I did. My opinion has been confirmed, and I reiterate my advice." "I assure you," Mr. Shriver replied in a friendly accent, "that I'm very sorry for you and also for poor father. I understand that this must have caused you displeasure, and therefore it would be much better if we did not talk about it." "I don't understand you," exclaimed Mr. Laurie. "I don't dare say otherwise, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter." "On the contrary," Mr. Laurie replied. "No, I assure you not, assuming that there was some common sense where it does not exist, and a laudable ambition where there is none. I have come out of my mistake, and no one has been harmed. It is not the first time that young women have committed such nonsense, and then bitterly regretted it as they found themselves plunged into poverty. Looking at the matter without the slightest selfishness, I'm sorry that the thing has not gone ahead, although from the worldly point of view, it would have been a disastrous business for me. Now, looking at my egotism, I am glad that it's failed, because for me, it would have been a really bad business, and it is clear that I would not have gained anything from it. But in short, there is no harm to anyone. I have not offered my hand to that lady, and between us, I have almost the certainty that my sacrifice would not have reached that point. It is not possible, Mr. Laurie, to correct the frivolities. It is not possible, Mr. Laurie, to collect the frivolities and follies of those empty heads. And if you propose it, you will be sorry. But now let's not talk about it anymore. I have already told you that I am sorry for the others, but I am glad for myself. I'm highly recognized for the advice you gave me. You know that lady better than I do. You were right, and he shouldn't have done that foolish thing. Mr. Laurie was dumbfounded and gazed in amazement at Shriver, who was leading him toward the door as if animated by the utmost generosity, nobility, and good feelings. Believe me, Mr. Laurie, do not worry more about this matter. I thank you for everything. Good night. And Mr. Laurie was out on the street before he knew it, while Shriver flopped down on his couch, staring at the ceiling. That was the end of chapter 12. We'll pick up on chapter 13, A Subject Nothing, next time in A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. I'm Nalani Brown. Thanks for listening.